here at Light of Faith Bible Fellowship, where Yahushua HaMashiach, commonly called Jesus the Messiah, is our Jesus the Christ, is our light. Our statement of belief is this: living, he loved us; dying, he saved us; buried, he carried our sins far away; but rising, he justified us, freed us forever. And one day he's coming back, one glorious day. And until that day, we occupy until he comes. That word occupy means to handle business. We handle his business. We handle the master's business until he comes. How do we do that? We watch, we wait, and we prepare for his imminent return. It is our desire, our sincerest desire, that by the end of this worship, you would have been encouraged, empowered, and even edified through your connection with this ministry. Thank you so much, those viewing us via Facebook, those viewing us via our live stream in YouTube. We thank the Most High that once again you made us your choice, not only for Sabbath day worship, but also for your midweek edification and encouragement as well. Now, let's continue in our series entitled You've Been Set Free. Our overall heading for this series, since we're coming from the book of Romans, Romans chapter 8 to be specific, is All Roads Lead to Rome. And what Paul is telling us in every chapter, in every verse, pretty much in every letter, every word in his epistle to the Romans, that word epistle simply means letter. In his letter to the Romans, he's simply trying to let them know, and by way of biblical and life application, trying to let us know also that we have been set free. This would be part 8. If you missed any of our previous lessons, please go to our Facebook page, Light of Faith Bible Fellowship, our YouTube channel by the same name. Like us, share with us, befriend us, follow us. We welcome you to be a part of our virtual family. But let's pick up where we left off this past Sabbath day, dealing with Romans chapter 8, verse 28. And we'll springboard into verses 29 and 30 for our lesson on tonight. But notice what Paul wrote in this pericope, starting with verse number 28, reading out the English Standard Version. He said, "And we know that for those who love Alohim, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." Hold on to that word called, because it's getting ready to show up again. We got to see if we can wrap our arms, Luther, around that verb called. What is he trying to tell us with called? He uses that word a lot in his writings. What is he trying to convey to us with this called idea? Those called according to his purpose. Notice now what he said in verse 29, how he picks up on that same idea. He said, "For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he, his Son, might be the firstborn of among many brothers." Verse 30, "And those whom he predestined," in verse 29, in verse 30, he did a little bit more. He did not only predestine to conform to the image of his Son, but in verse 30, those whom he predestined, the text says again now in verse 30, here it is again, Sister Cheryl, he also, here it is, called. Wow. So anytime we see a word repeated that often, I think the author is trying to tell us something, isn't he? He also called, and those whom he, here it is again, Uncle Rick, whom he called, he also justified, and those whom he justified, he also glorifies. The grass withers, the flowers fade, but the word of the Most High shall stand, shall last forever. In our Sabbath day worship again, Paul in verse 28 emphasized our eternal security as believers by telling us what we know. Again, he said, "And we know that all things work together for good." to those who love the Lord and called according to his purpose. He reaffirmed, he reassured us of what we already know. We learned that the tense of that verb says that it was in the present tense, it was in the indicative mood, but it was in the active voice, meaning that we already know. He's not telling us something that we don't know, or something that we'll know down the road later on, but he's saying you already know this. And being that is in the present tense, he said, even while I'm telling it to you, you know it. You remember that from our lesson? He emphasized what we, as it relates to our eternal security, he emphasized what we know. Now, in verses 29 and 30, Paul is going to now emphasize our eternal security, now based on what the Most High foreknew. Notice again how he opens verse 29. Again, in verses 29 through 30, Paul expounds that we as believers are predestined for glory. Hold on to that word too. We got to deal with that word too. That word has been turned into something spooky and crazy that's way off base than what Paul is actually talking about. But the idea, if you will, or the immediate context of verses 28 through 30 is how we as believers are predestined for God's esteem, for his glory, as we would say, doxado in the Greek, and we'll deal with that toward the end of our lesson, time permit. But here is the eternal security. Here it is, that this predestination cannot, whatever that is, Sister Cheryl, that this predestination, whatever that is, it cannot be altered. For it includes the present moment of time, as well as the vast reaches of eternity, past and future. In verse 28, this predestination relates to our daily concern of men. It relates to the daily concern of men. For Paul reminds us again, let's pass by one more again, our daily concerns, that all things work together for good to them that love Alohim, to them who are called according to his purpose, our daily concerns. Piece of machinery, all things work together for good to them that love God, for the simple reason, again, that his purposes cannot be thwarted. His purposes cannot be undone. Although we may not see it now, everything one day will be seen to fit into the Most High's perfect plan. On this side of the flood, it doesn't always look like it. The song says the verse says we are troubled on every side. Seems like we have more downs than we have ups. Always climbing the rough side of the mountain, if you will. But one day we'll see that all things are fit into Elohim's, into his perfect plan. The fact that we are predestined for glory cannot be altered for another reason as well. It cannot be altered for another reason. Predestination, whatever that is, and we'll deal with it, relates itself not only to the daily concerns of men, but it also relates itself to the eternal counsels of Alohim. It also relates itself to the eternal counsels of the Most High. Verse 29 states that Elohim brings us one. Note this if you're taking notes. Verse 20, starting in verse 29, he lets us know that God brings us into a sphere of his wisdom. What are you talking about, Derek? He brings us into the the sphere, sphere, into the sphere of his wisdom. Notice how he opens verse 29. He says, "For those whom he foreknew," uh, let's stop right there. That word there, foreknew, prognosko, in the Greek actually means, in its primary sense, in its simplest application, it means to know beforehand. It means to know beforehand. In its secondary application, it means to choose beforehand. Let's look at the verse again. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined, or he predestinated, to know beforehand. Those whom he, first application, who he knew beforehand. The idea is that he knew you even before you knew yourself, even before your father knew your mother, in the biblical sense of knowing, if you will, as it relates to procreation and recreation. The text suggests that he already knew you. We learned in our Sabbath day lesson that there are two words for know. One is idu, which means to know intuitively. And the base word here of prognosko, the other word for know is gnosko, which means to know experientially, to know through experience, or know because you've gone through something. Now here, Paul is conveying to us that in his sphere of wisdom, watch his wisdom, watch that even before there was a you, he already knew you. He already had experience with you. Luther, I can't even wrap my head around that, because the only thing I can understand on this side, as far as what I have experienced, thereby I know, is that I have went through it, or I have experienced it in some kind of way, but some kind of way through the halls of eternity, past, present, and future, even before one atom of my genome was put together, that he already had experience with us. Are y'all with me? you know, wrap your head the best you can around that sphere of wisdom. That's wisdom in its highest order. That he already chose you beforehand. Isn't that something? Now, many theologians get into this debate of Elohim's sovereignty versus humanity's will. To me, that's a moot point. It really don't take you anywhere, because he made you in his image after his likeness, and he will never violate your will anyway. But the fact that in his sovereignty, Paul is not pitting one against the other. Paul don't have time with silly arguments. He's not pitting man's will against God's sovereignty. He's just letting you know that in his sovereignty, in the sphere of his wisdom, that he already had experience with you, even though you did not exist. Deal with that. Let's say what Paul is saying. Again, our petty arguments don't mean anything. It doesn't take it in, anyway, those whom he chose beforehand, to know beforehand, to choose beforehand. You didn't choose him. He chose you. That's what Paul in essence, is trying to get you to see that even though in your will you chose him, the onus was not on your choosing. He chose you first, even before you knew yourself. You know, even before you loaded Pampers up, he already knew you. Okay? He already chose you. You know, that's something to shout about right there, isn't it? Watch this. For those whom he foreknew, not only did he bring us into the sphere of his wisdom, but he also now shows us in verse 30 with the next clause that he brings us under the sovereignty of his will. That's where I'm trying to go. Paul moves us from his wisdom to the sovereignty of his will. Notice what he said. For those whom he foreknew, he also, here it is, here's the sovereignty of his will. He predestined, he predestinated to be conformed to the image of his son. Piece by piece, Derek. He predestinated, or he predestined. What does that word mean? Because oftentimes, again, in the halls of Christian thought, from a Christocentric perspective, when the idea or the theology, if you will, of predestination is presented, is always a predestination to a where. That's not what the text is talking about. Look at the verse again. Paul is not talking about being predestinated to where, or a predestination to where. He's talking about a predestination to what? Are you with me? He chose you beforehand. Watch this. Not to a where, Luther. He predestined you. He chose you beforehand to a what and to a who. Are you with me? You know, the theology always branches off into the idea of he knows who's going to heaven and who's not. Again, look at the verse here. That's not Paul's argument, you know, of who's going to heaven and who's not going to heaven. You know, his argument is that he predestined us to conform to the image of his son. Are you with me? So the argument of predestination has to be, if we are, since we are predestined, what are we predestined for? To a where or to a what? According to Pauline theology here, he proorizo in the Greek, watch this, which means to decide beforehand. Note that if you're taking notes. Predestined here means to decide beforehand. Now, foreknew means to choose beforehand or to know beforehand, but now he couples this foreknowing with the predestination, which he now adds to it or compounds it, if you will, with what he chose beforehand, coupled with what he decided based on what he chose beforehand. Am I making sense? He made a choice and then made some decisions about the choice that he made. So if foreknew means to choose beforehand, and predestination, proorizo, means to decide beforehand, that's what Paul is trying to drive home here. That in his wisdom, he made a choice. The sovereignty of his will. The will is the ability to make decisions. The will are the choices that you make. Are you with me? So according to his wisdom, Luther, he made a choice. He made a decision. Are you with me? Secondary application. proorizo, predestined. In the New Testament, it speaks of Elohim decreeing from eternity, or it means to foreordain or to appoint beforehand. So, Auntie Carvey, what he chose beforehand, now Paul is giving us another picture. He chose and he also appointed. Are you with me? Watch this. It's possible to choose something all day long. Just because you chose it, don't mean that you took to the next step and appointed it for a certain purpose. Am I making sense? You know, look at the detail herewith Paul is presenting to us. You know, he's getting to the nitty-gritty of our eternal security. In other words, he's saying the Most High left no stone unturned. He chose you beforehand, and he also appointed you beforehand. All of us should be jumping up and clicking up our heels right about there. Yeah. That we were not only chosen beforehand, but we were also what? Appointed. Have you ever looked at yourself through that lens before? Through his eternal perspective. It'll brighten your day. It just brightened my night. I'm gonna sleep real good now, aches and pains and all. Just realizing that he has appointed what he chose. And he did so, decreed from the eternity of heaven. Isn't that good news? What did he appoint beforehand? Notice the eternal security. Here it is. Again, he did not predestinate us to a where. No. He predestined us to a what? What's the what? To conform to the image of his son. You see that right there in the text? That's not a where, saints. That's a what and a who. So let's say what the text say. Let's be textual and contextual. Okay? He decided beforehand, he appointed beforehand that we might be conformed. The word conformed means to be fashioned like unto. To be fashioned like unto. It means to be like. Watch this. He appointed us beforehand to be like his son. Isn't that something? Now, look at yourself. Look at yourself and say, wait a minute. Do I look like his son? You got to ask yourself that, because that's what he predestined you to. He predestined you to look and to act like his son. He did not predestinate you to go to heaven. That's not Paul's argument, at least not in this verse. Are you with me? You know, beforehand, his goal was for you and me to look like and to act like his son. That's the text. Watch this. What's the purpose of that? I see the what. Now, what's the why? Next phrase. In order that the Son, Yahushua HaMashiach, might be the firstborn among many brothers. So he wants then us to look like and act like our big brother. That's what he appointed us. That's what he chose us and appointed us beforehand to do and to be. And Paul calls that the security of the believer. Now, again, in verses 14 through 27, we examine the sonship of the believer. Now, Paul is adding to his argument with all of the ands, all of the ands that he's adding. He's building on the premise and saying that not only are we sons and daughters, but we are secure sons and daughters based on what he foreknew and based on what he predestined. That makes sense so far? Yeah. Not only the word image there is where we get our word icon from, that we might be conformed to the image of his son. The word image there means representation, resemblance, if you will. The picture of the word is that of a statue or that of a profile. In all of the countries on the earth, there are statues of various things. There are statues of people, statues of presidents and leaders and prominent figures and things like that. Is the statue the actual thing or just an image? Yeah, it's just an image. Exactly. But when you look at the statue, it lets you know who the statue is, or what the statue is, or what it represents. That's the idea here with the word image. That when the world see us, they ought to see the statue of the Most High, or the statue of the Son, the image, the resemblance, are you with me, of the Son. Not only does Paul not only does Elohim bring us into the sphere of his wisdom, he foreknew us, and the sovereignty of his will, he predestined us for his glory to be conformed to the image of his Son. But now Paul also in verse 30 details our eternal security even further. He writes that the Most High also brings us under the sound of his word. Under the sound of his word. Watch this. Next phrase. He says, and those whom he predestined, those whom he appointed beforehand. Here's the soundness of the word, of his word. He also called. Now we saw that word called, that verb called appeared also in verse 28. Those called according to his purpose. Now Paul is going to give us another picture of this calling. Kaleo in the Greek, Auntie Carvey, in its primary application, Uncle Rick, it means to invite. Oh, Jesus Christ Almighty. Okay, let's go to work, Uncle Rick. Let's go to work. It's just me and you tonight again. Let's go to work. Watch it. Watch it. Notice the compounding. The Most High wants a return on his investment, so he does some compounding. Watch this. Those whom he predestined, those whom he appointed beforehand because he chose beforehand. The text now says that he called, which in its primary application, primary meaning, it means to invite. Meaning, yes, he invited you to something. What did he invite us to? Those whom he chose and appointed, the text says he invited. What did he invite us to? Secondary application, secondary meaning, if you're taking notes. Called here means to give a name to or to receive a name of. That's the invitation. He invited you, watch this, to give you a new name. He invited you because he wants you to receive a new name. Yeah. Uh-huh. Notice the compounding. Watch this. Let me see if I can give you a picture. The authority of the speaker dictates the nature of the calling. Let me say it again. The authority of the speaker dictates the nature of the calling. For example, friends invite, but kings summons. Y'all missed it. Let me say it again. Friends invite. However, kings, they summon. You know, when the king call you by name, the type of invitation that is, that's a summons. Are you with me? What's the implication here, Paul? Paul is saying that Alohim the king has summoned us with his invite to have a new name. If any man be in Christ, he is a what? New creature. What does that mean? New name. Whole things are passed away. Behold, all things have become what? New. Starting with your name. Have you ever looked at yourself through that lens before? You know, he's given you, watch this, through his choosing beforehand, through his appointing beforehand, he gave an invitation as the king, summoning you to a new name. Sounds like security to me. What say ye? You know, when the Most High secures something, it's secure. It's better than Brink's truck, isn't it? Somebody type in the comments, he's inviting me to take on a new name. Hold on to the new name, because he's going to compound that shortly. He further writes that the Most High brings us not only under the sound of his word, but he also brings us under the shadow of his wing. For it says, watch this, those whom he invited, he also, here it is, next verb, justified. Which adds to and builds upon the invitation to the new name. Justified, in its primary sense, it's a legal term, and it means to render or to declare righteous. It's courtroom talk. It means to come under a legal decree and to meet the legal standard. That's what makes you righteous. It's legal talk. It's courtroom talk. Are you with me? It means that you met the legalities of the text. Because he's given me a new name, with the new name, Uncle Rick, says that we have now been declared righteous. Y'all missed it. He don't give new names to unrighteous folk. He doesn't give new names to folk who does not meet his standard. It don't work that way. Once you meet with the new name, says something. That means something. It means that you are justified. You were called and justified, meaning that he sees you as meeting his standard. Now we got to ask ourselves, what is his standard? His standard is his commandments, his instructions. 1 John tells us that those who love God does what? Do what? Keep his commandments because they have his name. In its secondary application, it means to put someone in a proper relationship with another. Proper relationship with another. Meaning, with the new name, given the new name, that suggests that we are now in proper relationship with him, because in verse 1, he cleared up the legalities. He says, there's therefore now no condemnation. Remember? No charge of guilt with a penalty attached. Since he cleared up the legality, expunged the record, gave you a new name, because now you're in proper relationship with him. That's security, isn't it? Yeah. Finally, Paul pens that he brings us, finally, into the splendor of his will. He brings us into the splendor of his will. He showed us that he brings us into the sphere of his wisdom, under the sovereignty of his will, under the sound of his word, Luther, under the shadow of his wing. Now, finally, he shows us that those whom he called, he also justified under the shadow of his wing. Finally, he brings us, under the splendor of his will. Had a senior moment, y'all, sorry, getting older. It says, for those whom he justified, here is the splendor of his will. He also glorified. Those whom he justified, gave a new name, right relationship. Those to them he also glorified. Doxado, in the Greek, which means to celebrate. It means to honor. It means to esteem. It means to give praise. The picture of the word, it means to adorn with luster, or to render excellent or illustrious. Meaning, what Paul is intimating here with the idea of glorification is that Elohim praises you because he put his name on you. Isn't that something? To all the angels around the throne, he tells them, come here. Y'all look at Luther down there. Sure look good, don't he? With all that he been through. He sure look good down there. Why? Because I put my name on it. Am I making sense? We always look at it through the lens of us praising God, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, that's wonderful. We're supposed to do that. But here in the text, Paul is suggesting that from heaven, God praises you. Glorification. Am I making sense? The idea of the word is the prodigal son, Auntie Carver, who came home, and the father, watch this, didn't cuss him out, but he put a ring on his finger and a robe on his back. What was that, Sister Cheryl? That was glorification. That was celebration. He honored him with what? Luster, even though he was estranged. even though he spent up all the money, on fast cars and faster women. But when he came to himself, his father put a ring on his finger and a robe on his back. What's that called? That's called praise. Am I making sense? Now, the question on the floor is are we giving the Most High something to praise? Uh-oh. Are we giving the Most High a reason to say hallelujah because of our life and living? Those whom he called, he also gave splendor. Isn't that something? The verb glorified is in the past tense. Again, it says those whom he justified, he also glorified. And in the syntax, in the grammar, is in the past tense. Meaning, we do not have to wait until we die to see whether or not we are going to spend eternity with him. In Elohim's eternal counsel, we are already glorified. It's already done. Are you with me? We, the believers, are predestined. He already did it. God is not going to do anything. No, he's already did. Time is still catching up to him. That's why the best that we can say is God is going to. That's because we're talking from the perspective of living in time. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, but in the annals of eternity, God ain't going to do nothing. It's already done. Are you with me? Wrap your head around that. Time is just catching up and trying to catch up. It's already done. We are already glorified. He sees us as already spending eternity with him. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. That's enough. That's enough. That's enough. Sonship, our sonship as believers is reflective of this new life. Also, now we see, start with in verses 28, 29, and 30, all the way to the end of the chapter in verse 39, that our security as believers is also part and parcel of our security of believers in this new life. Mm-hmm. He's made us sons, and he has made us secure. And Paul calls that the new life. Mm-hmm. The new life that's given, according to verses 5 through 13, that's given by the new Lord as a result of verses 1 through 4, the new law. That's Paul's argument. You've been set free because you've been given a new law, a new Lord, and a new life. That's his argument. What say ye? Thanks again for making our page your destination. We appreciate this opportunity of allowing us to share in the scriptures. We pray you have been encouraged, empowered, and even edified through your connection with this ministry. Now come on back this coming Sabbath day. I'm going to pass the baton to our next preacher, Minister Luther Tucker, uh, who's going to pick up with verse 31 and go as far as he want to go. And once I see his cutoff point, then our next Bible study we'll pick up with somewhere after verse 31. But I'm passing it to Luther Tucker and say run. If you feel like it, run on to verse 39 if you feel like it. You can run on to verse 39. That's fine with me, you know. But I'm thankful to the Most High to have that kind of help sharing with the Word, that we can partner up with other preacher personalities and speak on the goodness and share our convictions about our Christ. So our life and living can be reflective of the God that we serve. Thanks again for making our page a destination. We appreciate this opportunity of allowing us to share in these scriptures. We pray you have been encouraged, empowered, and even edified through your connection with this ministry. Signing off, y'all. Take care.